Congress needs a man like my husband, Robert Franklin. He's a man of character and decency. He's lived a life of faith. He's led a life of service. He was close with John Lewis. They shared principles of integrity. We need more leaders like Robert Franklin who put people ahead of politics.
I'm Robert Franklin, and I approve this message.
Hello, and welcome to a special Thanksgiving Day edition of Talk to Me. And our guest, as you just saw, is the former Morehouse College president and now 5th District special election runoff candidate, Dr. Robert Franklin. Dr. Franklin, thank you, and happy holiday to you, sir.
Happy Thanksgiving to you and all of your viewers and listeners. Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Franklin, you've had such an esteemed career. Morehouse College president, a theologian, Emory University educator. Why this? Why politics now?
Well, the vocations that you just mentioned, including my role as a college president, as a seminary president of the esteemed ITC, right, as a program officer at what was then the nation's wealthiest foundation in New York City and throughout the world, the Ford Foundation, with responsible for grant making to organizations around the nation and around the world, as well as my role in various and sundry advisory committees for 3 U.S. presidents. I have felt as a call to public service all of my life. Morehouse prepared me for that, and I've been engaged in public service. With respect to politics and electoral service, that is a new dimension, a new manifestation of an old calling. And I'm excited by it and was, of course, triggered by the departure of the Reverend C.T. Vivian and John Robert Lewis on the very same day. That really spoke to me, Maynard. It grabbed me in a powerful way, and it became an invitation to manifest that long-standing call to public service in a new electoral way, and to ask the public to support our vision for how we move forward, albeit for a brief time, but perhaps with future opportunities for continued public service. So it's, again, a continuum. Is now having a new manifestation prompted by 2 of my friends and mentors who departed to eternity, and now trying to be faithful to them and to the public who on the special election day, as you know, on September 29th, I was the 2nd highest vote getter as a newcomer, and just 3 percentage points behind a long-standing career politician. So I think that said something to me and to the public about the kind of leadership our nation, our public, our 5th District wants as we go forward.
Has it been different for you asking for votes? New politicals say that's a little difficult, asking folks to vote for them. Has that been a new turn, a new twist for you?
Not really, because even as president of the esteemed Morehouse College, essentially, of course, that's fundamentally about fundraising, right? And making a pitch to members of Congress, to foundation leaders, to individuals, especially high net worth individuals, and certainly to families as we recruit these students from all over the world. And what you're doing is 2 things. You're telling the story of the institution, and then second, inviting people to invest in it. And so storytelling, representing, casting a vision has been what I've done over the years and refined, and I think I do a decent job of it. And then inviting people to join, to invest, to participate. So this was simply a matter of telling the story of my vision of the kind of leadership that Joe Lowry and C.T. Vivian and John Lewis, Andrew Young, and so many others have provided, and then inviting people to support me through their votes.
Should you win, will this short stay in Congress matter, make a difference? Can you do some things you think in that short period of time?
One of the things I've tried to communicate through social media and other places, and I'll say it here briefly now, is there are at least 4 significant milestone moments in the month of December. And the 5th Congressional District needs to have effective representation during that month as we lead to a transition to Congresswoman-elect Nikema Williams on Monday, January 4th. But during that period, on December 11th, for instance, number 1 milestone date, the federal government will run out of money. Will this government shut down, or will it pass a continuing resolution to continue? Whatever it does, the 5th District should be represented through powerful voice as well as vote to say very clearly that budgets are moral documents. Budgets are moral documents that express our priorities and our values as a people. Secondly, on December 14th, the electors, 538 electors, will certify the November 3rd presidential election. And although that occurs in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, we need voices that hold them accountable, to speak truth to power. And as one who has taught and written books about ethics and moral leadership, I think I can step in and do that effectively and essentially garner national attention for that call. That's December 14th, that second moment. The third moment comes on almost tragically and ironically the day after Christmas, December 26th, when much of the CARES Act, unemployment compensation and unemployment insurance, that was passed way back in March 27th, the CARES Act, expires. And some economists estimate that over 12 million people will lose their unemployment compensation at that point. That's a real sign of increased misery on its way. And then that final moment occurs on December 31st. While many will celebrate and welcome in a new year, on December 31st, 2 significant provisions expire. Number 1 is the student loan repayment moratorium. That's called forbearance. So students have had 0% interest loans. They've been benefited from suspended loan payments and repayment, and have been fortunate to have that coverage through December 31st. The other thing that will expire is the housing eviction moratorium. So many housing developers and property owners are already beginning to push toward evicting people. And on December 31st, another wave of misery is on its way. The 5th Congressional District needs a voice to stand in the halls of Congress, to speak truth to power, and also to invite this nation to become a better version of itself. That's what moral leaders do. We know that that's what John Lewis would be doing. And it's important that they hear the importance of being good Samaritans, of looking out for our neighbors, of doing what I like to call adding the moral point of view. The moral POV, point of view, is simply asking, what impact will this policy or this budget measure or this law have on the least advantaged members of the society? What impact on the least advantaged? That's what John Lewis was a champion of. And for 4 months, this seat has been vacant. And I share the frustration of my colleague, opponent, Mr. Hall, that this is awful that we've gone now this long without representation. And I hope that he and others will join me as we work to ensure electoral reform in the state of Georgia. And part of that needs to include RCV, as it's called, ranked choice voting. That meant that on September 29th, when voters went to the polls to fill this seat for this interim period of John Lewis's unexpired term, they could have also selected their second choice for the office. If that had been done, we wouldn't have needed a runoff election, losing 2 months of a 3-month interim term. So I think this is a call. This is a call for electoral reform.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned your second choice. Your opponent, Mr. Hall, publicly asked for you to decline being in the runoff, did he not? How did you take that? I mean, he asked for you to step aside and let him go on to Congress.
I
I
have
see you smiling.
I have tried to be, to remain on the high ground and to respect, and I certainly do respect Mr. Hall and his years of public service and electoral service. Uh, Later in his career, he offered himself as candidate for mayor, and the city said no, thank you. And now this is kind of a comeback effort on his part, and I respect him. I've learned a lot from him, and I look forward to working together in the future. I think we both have important ideas, projects, energy, charisma, networks, friends who currently are a little standoffish
Right.
with respect to each other. But we need to all come together, and we will for those two elections on January 5th to elect two senators, Warnock, Ossoff. But I was taken aback by the what some of my campaign staff referred to as a pressure campaign to urge me
Yeah.
to drop out of the race. And of course, that would not have eliminated the need for an election. What one would have to do is ensure that all six of the other candidates not only dropped out, well, they hadn't proceeded to the runoff, they'd have to essentially engage in a legal maneuver to formally and legally withdraw through a signed affidavit their name from being considered for moving up if Dr. Franklin dropped out. And apparently, my colleague undertook the effort to get, he mentioned in his letter that three
Right.
of those persons had agreed to do so. I think that's interesting. I think it'd be helpful perhaps to produce those just so that we can ensure that all that is as he represented. But ultimately, people, Reverend Joanna Adams, for instance, a community leader, was outraged by this and wrote a pointed letter condemning the misuse of scripture in his communication. Secondly, calling him out on an act of arrogance and feeling that was completely out of the spirit of John Lewis. So, in some sense, a form of voter suppression. That is, would be a backroom deal between seven people to eliminate the need for an election. And I frankly think that's inappropriate. But I, again, respectfully decline his offer to drop out of the race.
Dr. Franklin, this has been a competitive competitive race for the still unexpired term. There are those who suggest it's unfair that Nikema Williams wasn't competitive at all. What are your thoughts about that? I mean, you'll be serving a short time if you win. She gets to walk right on in. I mean, there are those who find that offensive. And I'm sure amongst the electors you've talked to as well.
I have certainly heard that position expressed, even back in July after Congressman Lewis passed away on Friday, July 17. There were conversations underway about who would replace his name on the ballot. 130 people applied. The deadline was Sunday afternoon, July 19th. And I did apply after conferring with my wife, Dr. Cheryl Franklin, an OBGYN physician at Morehouse Healthcare. We prayed, we listened, we talked to wise people. We tried to understand whether or not some of the people I deeply respected were going to run, because if they were, I would step back and support them. But when I learned that many of them were not, I decided to apply. On Monday morning, July 20, I received a phone call saying, your name has been advanced with 4 others to be interviewed at noon today. So that was all the preparation we received. A call that morning after 10 a.m. in preparation for a meeting 2 hours later with the entire Democratic Party Executive Committee of Georgia. It looked like over 35 or 40 people. The 5 names that were advanced were selected by Stacey Abrams, a committee of 7. Stacey Abrams, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, President Carter's grandson, Jason Carter, and other distinguished community leaders. And the 5 names were State Representative Park Cannon, City Councilman Andre Dickens, State Senator Nikema Williams, NAACP leader James Woodall, and Dr. Robert Franklin, President Emeritus Morehouse College. 5 names. And so those names were brought forward. Now, after that meeting,
That
The
would have been a great campaign between those folks. That would have been,
yes,
a heck of a campaign.
it certainly could have been. It certainly could have been. And I have enormous, and I call their names out of respect for them
Right.
because they were extraordinary. And what does it say when a distinguished group of leaders come together, call through and examine the resumes and applications of 130 people and advance 5? And so I thought that was a strong affirmation. And so the committee that day, that Monday, voted while all 5 of us were on the phone, on the Zoom call watching, and they selected Nikema Williams. And many felt, I thought that she would automatically cover the interim period of John Lewis's term as well, but that was not the case. And that's what called for the September 29 special election. Many thought that she would run in that election. She chose not to. And so that opened the way for others of us. And I was the only of the candidates on that September 29th who was a part of that original 5 selected by the distinguished leaders. I think that here again is a flawed process and it needs attention. So in addition to helping us work out this issue of what happens when there's an election and not a lot of time left to serve, you don't delay 2 months to have a runoff election. You just add that possibility to the ballot for the first election, only election. And so that's what I'm hoping for, that the Georgia Democratic Party will look at its processes. I also noted and respected that John Lewis's staff weighed in on this whole matter and urged those who might be selected to replace John Lewis's name on the ballot for November would, after being elected, either resign or serve for a brief period and then resign and trigger an election that all candidates could enter fairly and be voted on by the people. I agreed to do that. I thought that was appropriate and respectful of John Lewis's staff and of wishes of many people. So again, I think it's a flawed process. It can be repaired, and I hope my colleagues, and I know they will, look at this carefully.
Dr. Franklin, you have a formidable campaign team. Can you hit the ground running with that team in D.C.? Are you ready to go day one?
Absolutely ready on day one. Fortunately, I know most of the John Lewis staff that continues to serve in Washington. I've communicated with them. Constituency services are continuing. Everything that happens in a congressional office to help citizens pretty much is going on under very competent leadership, except the voice and the vote needed on the floor of Congress. The 3 really principal concerns for the month of December. Number 1 is, of course, appropriations and passing it's no longer the CARES Act. That was passed March 27th, and that money is running out. A new measure as a follow-up has been introduced, and that is called the HEROES Act. And the HEROES Act, sponsored by Speaker Pelosi, provides, it started almost $4 trillion worth of funding. In negotiations with the White House and GOP Senate, that's pared down to about $2 trillion. And that is the principal priority for that time. And again, I want to lend my voice to saying budgets are moral documents. In addition, there will continue to be some oversight over the bad behavior of members of this GOP Senate and this White House staff, holding the president accountable, ensuring that this man exits the building. And I would spend that 30 days observing and holding the White House accountable, and then hand the baton to Congresswoman-elect Nikema Williams, who will spend the final 20 days until this gentleman, until Elvis leaves the building on January 20th. But the final thing that needs to happen, so appropriations oversight, is the messaging so important. This is why we know and remember and love John Lewis. Yes, the legislation is important. There won't be much legislating going on in December, frankly. It's going to be a time of setting a tone at the top in the nation. That's what leaders do. That's what I did as president of Morehouse College. And I've already sketched about 10 messages, Maynard. You're going to love these. The very first one, on the day one in office, I'd spend the morning with John Lewis's staff. I'd bring along the staff that I need from my team. You're right. They've been a superb campaign team for a newcomer to come in among the top 2 vote getters and revved up to win this election on December 1st with your help, the public's help. I would say that the first message that I've written is titled, John Lewis is Watching. John Lewis is watching. It's a message to the other 434 members of Congress, of the House of Representatives, but it's also a message to the 100 members of the Senate. And I certainly hope that, Brother Warnock and Mr. Ossoff will be just about on their way. Of course, their election doesn't occur until January after this term concludes. But I would leverage my national voice and leadership and profile and the prestige of Morehouse College and that's legacy to try to assist Mr. Warnock and Mr. Ossoff in this important effort to win that race. And that's an advantage that the Republican Party does not have. And I would argue it's a strategic advantage over even my colleague opponent in this race.
Finally, you mentioned Morehouse College.
Let me just tell you briefly, it'll take 2 sentences. The last message, I won't go through them all, it's about politics without principle, wealth without work, commerce without morality, a number of topics that Dr. King and Mahatma Gandhi inspired. But the very last one would occur on, ironically, a Sunday, January 3rd. I want to be there in Washington to call the entire nation to a time of silence, reflection, and memorial of John Lewis's legacy. These are John Lewis's days. That's why people should vote. These days are not Robert Franklin or Quanzo Hall or any other. They are John Lewis's final days. They overlap with Donald Trump's final days. That in itself is Shakespearean, but we don't have time to go there. But the very final message would be, well done, good and faithful servant.
Well, it's going to be, to hear you preaching on the halls of Congress, it's going to be quite phenomenal, quite phenomenal. But you mentioned Morehouse. I got to end with this note. You mentioned Morehouse College. One of the greatest honors of my life, sir, is for you to make me an honorary Morehouse man at halftime of one of the Morehouse College games. And I thank you. It's meant a lot to me, and I salute you for that.
Thank you, Maynard. You embody what I call the 5 wells of Morehouse. You are well-read, well-spoken, well-traveled, well-dressed, and well-balanced. And I want to proclaim that message from the halls of Congress to all the young people throughout America. We need a renaissance, a rebirth of good citizenship, a rebirth of moral leadership, and of the kind of community service that Maynard Eaton symbolizes.
Good luck and God bless you, sir. It was a pleasure talking with you. Now hear this message.